Alissa Carpenter, thank you so much for joining the One Degree Shift podcast. How are you today?
I'm hanging in there. I'm hanging in there. Thanks for asking.
Oh man, what a few 6 to 8 weeks it has been. In this time, I think we've been thrown into a new reality, which we've heard countless times before. But before our conversation, we agreed that we were settling in a little bit. And in this time, and in these past weeks, I've been reading a lot. I've been reading on Entrepreneur, been reading on LinkedIn, and I stumbled across not just one, but many of your articles and became an immediate fan of the work that you do, the thoughts that you have, and how you're approaching this pandemic leadership, teams, culture, and everything that we can do to ultimately build great organizations. So perhaps instead of hearing it from me, can you share a little bit about yourself, the work that you do, and ultimately what's most interesting or intriguing to you right now?
Sure. Thank you so much. That means a lot. I really appreciate it. It's been a really interesting few weeks, and the phrase of new normal and finding the new normal, it's evolved, I think, over
Mm,
these few weeks, and it's been fascinating to see what I'm capable of, what our family as a unit is, what our organizations are capable of. I think if you would have mentioned some of these things even months ago or a week before all this happened, you would never say, you would do a virtual happy hour with a team, or you do trivia with your friends, or happy hour. Like, all these things are just so different, and I think it's brought in so much, opportunity. I am most excited about now. I have my books coming out really shortly. It'll be out on the 11th, How to Listen and How to Be Heard, Inclusive
cool.
Conversations at Work. It's such
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. It still doesn't feel really real, which is
Mm,
strange because I have the physical book and I can hold it, and it
right.
just feels, when you work so hard on something and it comes to fruition, you're like, wait, oh, this is real. This happened.
Yeah.
And that I'm launching and joining class with it, actually a certificate programs for inclusive workplace communication, to be able to take that book to life, which is a 12-week program. So you can really work through it. It's 90-minute classes weekly so we can take it to the next level. So just very excited about what's to
Well,
come.
a huge congratulations. And
Thank
maybe
you.
that's what we can talk about because in this virtual distributed remote working environment, what are the things that you see organizations or teams doing well, and what perhaps are the opportunities that you see that they can take advantage of as well?
I think even we were talking about this a little bit before. I think it's a great opportunity to try new things and shake things
Mm,
up a little bit. Right now, people are more forgiving, I think, than they will ever be. So if you're trying Zoom, you're using it in a different capacity, trying these other technologies, even Google Classroom, just all of these things. Now's the time to check it out, because if you mess up, people are like, oh, it's okay. It's your
mm,
first time. We'll work through it together. We'll work through those glitches. So almost a throw spaghetti at the wall situation and kind of see what happens. That can be scary. That can be nerve-wracking. I know a lot of my clients brought in new people before this happened. So now they went from, hiring somebody one day and then onboarding them becomes online and all of these things. And it's overwhelming and it's
mm,
scary. And we went from, potentially a work from home environment to more of a crisis work from home. So companies, my client, they weren't prepared. VPN
right.
systems couldn't hold the capacity. You didn't have enough computers and devices and, all these things. But I'm loving the pivots people are doing, the community that it's really bringing people together. I think hopefully there's the good that's happening now as a humanity will continue moving forward
Right.
is my general hope.
How do we measure success like this? You said there have been lots of pivots and things like that. How do we know when we need to pivot versus when, maybe we should just stick through it? What's the line? If you're going through hell, keep going. How do we know when to stop and when we should pivot versus, perhaps being able to just keep running through the forest?
I think great question. I think it's tough because I've seen a lot of either entrepreneurs or companies in general pivoting almost too soon where things weren't ready to be launched. It's
Mm,
thinking, oh, we're going to go in this direction. Let's just throw this together and cobble this event together and make it a virtual event. That
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean it's the best thing to do. Just because you can do it, it doesn't mean it's the best thing to do. I think pivoting as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, always happens. I started my business in one direction. The end goal is the same. How I'm going about it is different. Really monitoring and seeing what's going on. There's a fusion between what you like and what you're good at and those gifts, what people need, and then what people will actually pay for. There
Sure.
has to be a synergy between all of those. And during this time, that's tricky, right? We have 17 million plus people filing for unemployment, people, out of jobs, don't have the budget. How
Mm-hmm.
can you think about what you're doing? Is there another way that you can deliver the service or the
Mm-hmm.
product that you have? Will it be the same? Will you be giving the same value to your customers on the other end? If not, can you price that accordingly? Or
Mm-hmm.
should you wait it out depending on what you have as we go back in the future? I think it's a great question. It's so big and broad depending on what
Mm-hmm.
company you're in, but I have seen people pivot too quickly. And then when we hopefully come out of the other side, you don't want to ruin everything that you've created
Totally.
before all this happened.
Okay, so I'm hearing a couple of things. Number one is that an MVP, we might be pivoting too early. We might just be throwing something out there and seeing if it sticks. The second thing that I'm hearing, though, is that people are more forgiving and giving us more opportunity than we've ever had before. Um, so where is that line then between let's try something new and let's not pivot too early? Because, hey, look, I agree with you on both fronts. I think we're all just trying to figure it out. I think that success in a situation like this, whether it comes to how we work with our people better, to how we put our products out into a new platform, a new medium, it all has to come through experimentation, right? Like you can't possibly predict the future. I often use the analogy of like, I've scratched lottery tickets before and I have no idea if I'm going to win even as I'm scratching it. So we like to think we can predict 5 and 10 years down the road. I can't even predict what's going to happen in 5 seconds.
Right.
What's the balance between experimentation and forgiveness?
Yeah. I think you also have to ask for feedback too. And I'm even just thinking of, I take classes at my local bar studio, and
Mm-hmm.
with this, it's a franchise organization. So I could pay the franchise fee, which is very inexpensive to do that online, or I
Mm-hmm.
can continue to pay my monthly membership to be part of this community that they have and have live instruction with the instructors there. And I think
Mm-hmm.
they would even admit at first it was a little clunky figuring
Sure.
out how this would work. But what they did was they asked for feedback. What time do you want to have classes? Do you want live
Mm-hmm.
classes? Is Zoom a good platform for this to be on? Are there specific equipment that you need that you don't have in your house that we can rent to you, or you can purchase through our studio, or we can provide you different links? I think it's
Mm-hmm.
awesome to start out and pivot and try, but you have to get feedback. And are people buying it or what you have? Because there's so many other things that are offered. You can get one Peloton now for 90 days free, right? You're competing
Mm-hmm.
with other things and trying to pivot. But if
Sure.
you have to ask for the feedback of your customers to see if it makes sense for you to still have this sustainable, business.
Yeah, and totally agree. And I think that equally applies with teams and leadership as well. The article that I first read was about 4 things that people need from their leaders in a time like this. Can you share what those 4 things are and ultimately how a leader can exemplify what those qualities and traits are?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things, and even when you asked me, how are you at the beginning of our conversation today, it sounds so silly. We ask
Mm,
people, how are you all the time? But right now, and we're used to having this default of good or fine, but right
right.
now we know that that's not right. Are you really good? Are you really
Hmm.
fine? And why is that happening? People want really empathetic leaders at this time to really engage and have those conversations with them. And being transparent too is very, very crucial. I think in this bigger picture, as organizations, as people are pivoting, people are losing their jobs, we don't know what's going on. So we're
Hmm.
looking for those leaders to be really transparent and to be really authentic. If you don't know that information, to let your team know. Attend different meetings if you can. Advocate for your team as people are losing jobs. So there are other things that you can stick up for your team for. Saying
Hmm.
thank you is also huge, and acknowledging, the accomplishments of the members of your team. I think the underlying element really of all of it is going to be being human, right? And
Yeah.
recognizing that we are all experiencing the same thing in general, but really internalizing it in different ways. And being a leader, it's the time to step up in a very different way than you have
Right.
before. Being human, being vulnerable, and being transparent are just essential right now. And you physically can't see people unless you're doing Zoom or something like
Mm.
this. So you have to be more communicative and really set expectations and be clear on what they are as well.
So absolutely agree. And, if I look at myself in the mirror, I would think, as any leader, likely, I would think, of course, I'm doing all that stuff. That's very, as an individual, that's what I need to do to be successful. The reality is, not many of us are. So the question then becomes, how do we increase our self-awareness to better understand how we're showing up with our team? How do we monitor, the pleases and the thank yous? How do we actually create time and space to be able to ask you how you really are? Because I agree with you too. You say, how are you, only as a segue to get to what's next, not really to see how the other individual is. And I think that self-awareness is missing in many cases. So what are the things that I might be able to do as a leader to be more aware of what those actions are or aren't, so I know what I need to work on?
Yeah, and it's interesting because even in my book, I have a whole chapter, and it's a little bit different spin, but more on toxicity and being a toxic, seeing your toxic colleagues. And the first thing is check yourself. And I'll be very
Mm,
honest that I am probably not all four of these things or do all of this during this time, because there's so many other responsibilities and expectations that you
sure.
just didn't have before. And oftentimes we're sending that really short email. It's not rude. You're just answering the question because you have to move on to the next thing, or you're probably
Totally.
here. I have two kids and my dog is probably out there. You're trying to balance all of these things. I like to, and whatever works for other people makes sense. Like, don't change your method if it doesn't work for you. So don't choose mine necessarily. But I'm a huge fan of using my calendar. So if some
Mm,
people, if it's their birthday, I honestly think we need to acknowledge and still celebrate things that are happening now. I put it
sure.
in my calendar. I will pre-schedule a paperless post, which is a free service where you can send an email to someone. So it's already scheduled. They get their, happy birthday card. I'll send a gift certificate. I've been using Brightbox as one of my favorites. It's $15 and it's get a bunch of little gifts. So I will
Cool.
pre-do that when I have that in my mind, or I'll put it in my calendar, because I
Hmm.
know I will not remember. There will be something else
Sure.
that
Yeah.
comes up. And I think it's important is even directing the conversation to other people. If you know you're innately not that person, and we also can't come from this space where we never asked these questions before, and now all of a sudden
Hmm.
we're showing that we care, right? It can't be the
Yeah.
0 to 100%
Hmm.
shift. But even saying to your employees, and hopefully you've built up that relationship, I am here for you. I want, to be able to support you, and asking for feedback of them. What can I do better? What do you need from me? Putting it back on them, not so the onus is on them, but so they truly know that you want to change, you want to be different, if you know that that's not your strength.
Right. Now, in some cases, when you're asking for feedback, though, that could be sort of opening the floodgates too. How do you sort of monitor what that feedback looks like, or what sort of structure can you put in place? Because really, what this comes down to is building better relationships between not just managers and juniors or employees, but people. So, do you have any sort of idea or suggestions on a bit of a framework that we could put into place?
I mean, first of all, I think any feedback is genuinely a gift. It may not feel like
Hmm.
it at the
Hmm.
time, but I think, being vulnerable and asking for it is important. You can
Hmm.
structure your feedback to the type of feedback that you're looking for. What
Hmm.
fires did you have to put out this week, this month, this year that could have been prevented? What
Hmm.
barriers are in your way that you may need help with? What support
Hmm.
or resources that you need can I provide, or can the organization provide? Be very
Hmm.
strategic in the types of questions or the feedback that you're asking, and only ask the questions if you plan to do something with what somebody said. So whether or not you plan to completely change your ways or get other resources, don't ask somebody, what can I remove for you? What can I help you with? And have no intention of doing that. Ask
Hmm.
questions that you're willing and vulnerable to take action on.
I just hope everyone on the other end of this podcast is just scribbling down these notes, because these questions are fantastic. They're concrete. They're able to be acted on, and perhaps ones that aren't top of mind for leaders. Because you said a lot of great things that I just hadn't considered before. What do you think is a silver lining of this pandemic and a new practice? I'm not gonna say best, because the idea of best practice universally just I don't think works, especially when it comes to teams and the development of great relationships. What are some new practices that you've seen that you think will be sort of table stakes? And the example that I'll kind of give is, in the last decade, we've seen like the ping pong table and the keg become sort of like table stakes, where it's not a competitive advantage or a differentiator anymore. It just becomes, we've got this, so does everyone else. I'm seeing a lot of sort of trust come into play, in that trust is sort of given first and then taken away. Rather in the past, I think trust has sort of been earned. But as we get into this remote distributed workplace, work is results based now more so than time based, and you have to trust people because no other option. What are some sort of practices that you're seeing you think will sort of become table stakes as we get into the office again, or sort of refresh into whatever the office or normal work might look like?
I definitely think, and I'll touch upon something else too, but I think remote work in general, a lot of my clients even talking about it before was, we can't do this. There's no way that position can make this happen. And that at this point is going to be table stakes of, wait a minute, I did this before. Now you can tell me I can't, how is this
Hmm.
working? My fear or concern about this would be, again, we're in a crisis work from home situation. So being able to monitor and track somebody's performance now with all these 100 other things going on is going to look very differently when kids go back to school.
Yeah.
People aren't sick as they are now, so that'll be different. But what I hope something doesn't change is just the humanity and my business name is Everything's Not Okay and That's Okay. And it's really revealing that curtain, right? We're doing these virtual calls. I was doing a webinar for a client yesterday, and people are like, I'm not wearing makeup. I don't care. This is my
Hmm.
house. This is what happened. We went from being so afraid to be vulnerable and share where we are, and you're bringing your professional self to work and might not have this other piece of you that you're sharing, and now you can't help but share it. There's no other way for you to avoid it, and
Hmm.
I hope that continues, because people are going to look for that, if not
Right.
before, more so now. Like the culture, your supervisor, your team, how willing are people to be themselves and share of
Yeah.
themselves?
Yeah, yeah, really interesting. And as a final sort of thought or question that I wanted to ask you, what do you think the biggest opportunity that we can capitalize on right now is, with respect to building great teams, being vulnerable, and having these conversations?
I think is almost creating this new playbook for your team, for your organization. As things have shifted, what are our goals? What is our vision? What is our mission? Have we changed that since things are happening? Are our needs really different? Are our customers' needs really different? Is our environment, our landscape different? I think it allows us, if we before felt a little barricaded in or blocked in, it allows us to think bigger, think differently. There are more opportunities, different opportunities than before. I'm hoping that that's taken advantage of, because I think there's just different things that we can think about. Social impact, I hope, becomes bigger and more important. Of, you see organizations even working together in distilleries, making hand sanitizer, and people doing PPE, like all these things are shifting and changing, and I hope that does not go away. Yes, I'm hoping we do not need masks at some point, but that buy one, give one concept, that social impact, I hope people find a way to continue and see that as an opportunity moving forward.
Hmm. Couldn't agree more. Alyssa, is there anything else you want to share with us today? Can you tell us a little bit about the book, where we can get in touch with you?
Sure. You can get in touch with me on my website at notokaythat'sokaycoach.com. And on there, it's everything about my new certificate program. The book, How to Listen and How to Be Heard, Inclusive Conversations at Work, can be purchased at Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and wherever books are sold.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for your time today. It's been great to have this conversation. A lot of concrete things we can put into action right away, so that we can build a better workplace for tomorrow today. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.